Most people have never heard of half the places on this list. And the ones they have heard of, they have no idea what actually makes them so insane to look at. Today we're going through 20 of the most beautiful places on this planet, and some of these genuinely don't look real. There are around 200 countries in the world. Hundreds of thousands of towns, mountains, coastlines, forests, and deserts. But somehow, certain places just hit different. There's something about them that stops people in their tracks. Something that makes you pull out your phone, stare, and feel like you've been dropped into a painting. We went through all of it and picked 20 places that stand above everything else. Some are famous. Some are basically unknown. All of them are absolutely wild to see. Let's start with something that a lot of people have seen on screen without realizing it was real. Zhangjiajie, in the Hunan province of China, is a forest of sandstone pillars that shoot straight up out of the ground like something a movie director invented. Some of these columns reach over 1,000 meters tall. They're covered in trees and mist, and from certain angles they genuinely look like they're floating. In fact, that's exactly what inspired the floating mountains in the movie Avatar. The filmmakers visited this place and basically said, yeah, we're using this. What makes Zhangjiajie so dramatic is the way the fog rolls through it. On cloudy mornings, the tops of the pillars poke out above the clouds, and the lower parts disappear completely. You're standing at the top looking down and all you can see is white. It looks like the earth just dropped away. There are glass-bottom bridges here too, one of which held the world record for being the longest and highest glass bridge on the planet. Walking across it means walking over a 300-meter drop on a clear floor. Down at the very southern tip of South America, where the continent is trying to disappear into the ocean, is one of the wildest landscapes on the planet. Patagonia is enormous. It covers the southern parts of both Argentina and Chile, and within it you'll find jagged mountain peaks, huge glaciers, turquoise lakes, and wind so strong it can knock you off your feet. Torres del Paine in Chile is one of the most famous parts of Patagonia, a national park where 3 towers of granite rise straight up over 2,000 meters above a river and a lake. On a clear day, the reflection of the towers in the water below is so perfect it looks like the image was flipped by a photo editor. The ice here is another story. Perito Moreno Glacier in Argentina is one of the few glaciers in the world that's not shrinking. It's actually moving. Creeps forward a few meters every day, and chunks of it break off into a lake constantly. You can sit and watch house-sized blocks of blue ice crash into the water in real time. This one is genuinely hard to believe when you first see it. Socotra is an island off the coast of Yemen in the Arabian Sea. It's been isolated from the rest of the world for so long that around a third of its plant life exists nowhere else on Earth. And some of that plant life looks completely alien. The most famous is the dragon blood tree. These trees have a thick, straight trunk that branches out at the very top into a shape that looks almost like an umbrella, or like the inside of a mushroom scaled up to tree size. They grow in groups across rocky, flat plateaus, and when you see a field of them against a clear sky, it genuinely looks like a different planet. They're called dragon blood trees because if you cut one, the sap that comes out is deep red. The ancient world used this red sap as dye, medicine, and even as a paint for violin makers. The rest of Socotra is just as unusual. White sand beaches, bright blue water, caves, and plants and animals that have nowhere else to go but here. Between Norway and Iceland, in the middle of the North Atlantic, there's a group of 18 islands that barely anyone talks about. The Faroe Islands are dramatic in a very specific way. The cliffs here drop straight into the ocean, hundreds of meters of pure vertical rock before the water. The grass on top is intensely green because it rains constantly. The clouds sit so low that they drag across the top of the hills. And the villages are so small and remote that they look like they were placed there centuries ago and nobody's touched them since. One of the most photographed spots in the Faroes is Gasadalur, a tiny village perched at the edge of a cliff with a waterfall that shoots off the edge and falls directly into the ocean below. The village is so remote that before a tunnel was built in 2004, the only way to reach it was on foot over a mountain pass. There's also a lake here called Sorvagsvatn that creates one of the most confusing optical illusions in nature. From one specific angle, the lake appears to be sitting hundreds of meters above the ocean below it, like water hovering in the air. It's caused by the way the cliff curves and the angle of the viewing point, but it still looks completely impossible. Underground, in the American Southwest, there are cracks in the earth where the light behaves in ways that don't seem like they should be possible. Antelope Canyon is a slot canyon, a narrow channel cut through sandstone rock by water over millions of years. The canyon walls are smooth and curved, like someone reached in and sculpted them by hand. The rock is layered in purples, oranges, reds, and deep browns. And because the canyon is so narrow at the top, sunlight only reaches the bottom for a short time each day. When it does, the light bounces off the curved walls and creates what look like beams shooting straight down into the ground. The colors in the canyon shift as the sun moves. For a few minutes around midday, the inside of Antelope Canyon glows like it's lit from within. There are two sections, upper and lower. Upper Antelope Canyon is the one with the famous light beams. Lower is more physically dramatic, with tighter passages and more twisted shapes. Both of them look like somewhere between a cathedral and a painting. The Navajo Nation manages this land, and it's their sacred ground. It's one of the most photographed places in the American Southwest, and somehow, even after seeing 1,000 photos of it, seeing it in person still catches people off guard. 16 lakes connected by waterfalls, all flowing into each other in a chain through a forested canyon in Croatia. That's Plitvice Lakes National Park. What makes it different from other lake systems is the color of the water. A turquoise and green that looks almost artificial. The color comes from the minerals dissolved in the water and the algae and moss that live in the lake beds. Because the water is so clear, you can see the bottom in most places, and when sunlight hits it from above, the whole lake seems to light up from underneath. The waterfalls between the lakes come in every size, from thin ribbons that drift down between mossy rocks, to wide curtains of water that drop several meters at a time. Wooden boardwalks run through the whole park, taking you directly over the water and through the forest, close enough to feel the mist. It's the kind of place where you think the photos have been edited, and then you walk in and realize they haven't. The largest salt flat in the world covers more than 10,000 square kilometers in the southwest of Bolivia. Sala de Uyuni was once a prehistoric lake. When it dried up, it left behind a crust of salt that's now so flat and so white that it acts as a near-perfect mirror when a thin layer of water covers it during rainy season. At that point, the sky and the ground become one. People and vehicles driving across it look like they're floating in the middle of the clouds. The horizon disappears. There's no way to tell where. The Earth stops and the sky starts. It's used by NASA satellites to calibrate their instruments because it's the single flattest surface on the planet. In the dry season, it becomes a cracked, white plain of hexagonal salt tiles stretching to every horizon. Islands of rock and cactus sit in the middle of it like something from a dream. And at night, with no light pollution and a completely flat reflective surface beneath you, the stars reflect below you as clearly as they appear above. In the Gulf of Tonkin off the northeast coast of Vietnam, there are over 1,600 limestone islands rising from the sea. Ha Long Bay has been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the reason is obvious from the moment you see it. The islands, called karsts, were formed over millions of years by water and wind slowly dissolving and shaping the limestone. They range from small spires barely larger than a house to massive formations with caves and beaches inside them. The bay is best seen from the water. Traditional wooden boats called junks take visitors through the islands, and as you move between them the light shifts, the mist rolls in off the water, and the scale of everything starts to hit. Some of the caves inside the islands are enormous, big enough to hold hundreds of people, lit by natural openings in the roof. The name Ha Long translates roughly to descending dragon. According to local legend, the islands were formed when dragons descended from the mountains and smashed their tails into the sea, creating the fractures and peaks that remain today. Another entry from China, but this one is completely different from Zhangjiajie. Zhuhaigu is a valley in the Sichuan province of southwestern China that is most famous for its colored lakes. These lakes range from deep sapphire blue to vivid green to pale turquoise, sometimes all within the same body of water, changing color depending on depth, minerals, and angle. Dead trees have fallen into some of the lakes and stayed there, and because the water is so clear and mineral-rich, the wood doesn't rot the way it normally would. You can see entire trees at the bottom of the lakes, perfectly preserved, with the colored water around them. waterfalls connect the lakes, and in winter, some of them freeze into pale blue and white curtains of ice. The valley is also surrounded by mountain peaks and forest that changes color dramatically in autumn. So the whole place turns gold and red at the same time the lakes are doing their color shifts. The Maldives is an island nation sitting in the Indian Ocean southwest of Sri Lanka, and it is basically the definition of what people picture when they think of a perfect tropical setting. But what's actually interesting about it isn't just the white sand and clear water. It's the geography. The Maldives is made up of around 1,200 coral islands spread across 26 atolls. The average elevation of the entire country is less than 1 meter above sea level. It is the lowest lying country on Earth. This means the water is everywhere and always close. The famous overwater bungalows here aren't just for style. The islands are so small that building up rather than out is often the only option. The bioluminescence is one of the lesser-known features. On certain beaches at night, particularly on Vadhu Island, the plankton in the water lights up electric blue when disturbed. Waves rolling in glow as they crash. Footsteps in wet sand leave glowing marks. The whole shoreline pulses with blue light in the dark. Underground cities, fairy chimneys, pillars with rounded tops that look like something a child would draw if they were trying to imagine what aliens lived in. Early inhabitants of the region carved their homes directly into these formations. Then they carved deeper, building underground cities that went several floors below the surface, complete with ventilation systems, kitchens, storage, and chapels. Some of these underground cities could house tens of thousands of people. The most famous experience in Cappadocia is the hot air balloon ride at sunrise. Because the valley is so protected from wind and the elevation is ideal, the conditions here are some of the best in the world for ballooning. Hundreds of balloons rise at once, drifting over the fairy chimneys as the sun comes up, and the sight from below or above is one of the most photographed in the world. Underground in the Waikato region of New Zealand, there's a cave system where the ceiling appears to be covered in stars. Except they're not stars. They're glowworms. Thousands of tiny larvae of a specific fly species native to New Zealand attach themselves to the cave ceilings and produce a blue-green bioluminescent light, using it as a lure to attract and catch other insects. The result, for anyone floating beneath them on a boat in the dark, is a ceiling that looks exactly like a night sky full of stars. The silence in these caves makes the experience even more unusual. The tour is done mostly in the dark, mostly in silence, in a slow-moving boat while looking straight up at thousands of tiny living lights above you. It's one of those places that no photo quite prepares you for. On the edge of the Thessaly Plain in central Greece, a series of enormous rock columns rise from flat ground. On top of some of them, perched right at the edge, hundreds of meters in the air, are monasteries. Meteora means suspended in the air in Greek, which is exactly what the monasteries look like. These rock formations are what's left of a seabed from millions of years ago, exposed by erosion over time. They're some of the most dramatic geological formations in Europe. The first monks settled here in the 9th century, climbing the rock faces by hand to find isolation and safety. By the 15th and 16th centuries, there were 24 monasteries on top of various rocks. Today, 6 survive and are still in use. The only way to reach them used to be by rope and basket, pulled up by monks at the top. Now there are carved stone staircases, but the isolation is still remarkable. Seeing the buildings from below, clinging to flat-topped rocks with sheer drops on every side, is one of those things that's hard to process as real. The Amazon is not a single landscape, it's more like a continent within a continent. Covering more than 5.5 million square kilometers across 9 countries, the Amazon looks like a flat green carpet stretching to every horizon. From inside, it's a living system so dense and complex that it changes minute to minute. The sounds alone, layers of birds, insects, and animals, create something that's closer to a constant roar than what most people think of as silence in nature. The lowest point on the surface of the earth is a body of water so salty that nothing can live in it, and that same saltiness makes it impossible for a person to sink. The Dead Sea sits at around 430 meters below sea level, which means it's the lowest place you can stand on the surface of the planet. The water feeds into the sea from rivers, but nothing flows out, it just evaporates, leaving the salt behind. The result is water that's around 10 times saltier than the ocean. When you walk into the Dead Sea, you don't swim. You float, automatically without effort. The density of the water is so high that your body is pushed upward. People sit in it like they're sitting in an invisible chair, holding newspapers above them, their legs floating up in front of them. The shoreline is covered in salt crystals. The water is so clear and heavy it feels wrong on your skin. And looking out across it toward the mountains of Jordan or Israel, the combination of the blue water, the salt white shore, and the dry hills in every direction is something completely unlike any other place. In the Arctic Circle, about 300 kilometers above the line where the midnight sun begins, there's an archipelago of islands with some of the most dramatic natural scenery in Europe. The Lofoten Islands rise sharply from the sea, steep mountains going almost straight up from the water, their peaks often buried in cloud. Small fishing villages, with their iconic red and yellow wooden houses, sit at the base of these cliffs on narrow strips of flat land between mountain and water. In summer, the sun never sets. It dips toward the horizon around midnight and then starts rising again, casting golden light on everything for hours. In winter, the sun barely appears, but in its place comes the northern lights. Green and sometimes purple and white bands of light shifting across the sky above the mountains and their reflections in the water below. Lofoten is also one of the best places in the world to see the northern lights because the combination of clear winter skies and relatively low light pollution makes the displays here especially vivid. The falls that separate Zambia from Zimbabwe are, by the measure that combines both width and height, the largest waterfall in the world. Victoria Falls is around 1,700 meters wide and drops about 108 meters. The volume of water going over it during peak flow, over 500 million liters per minute, creates a spray so massive it can be seen from 50 kilometers away. The local name for the falls translates to the smoke that thunders, which is exactly what they look like, a wall of mist with a roaring sound that you feel more than hear. There's a natural rock pool at the very edge of the falls called the Devil's Pool. In low water season, people can swim to it and sit at the edge of the cliff looking straight down 108 meters to the churning water below, with just a natural rock lip between them and the drop. From the air, the whole system looks like a gash cut across the landscape. A narrow gorge that the water falls into, then shoots out sideways in a series of tight turns. The oldest desert in the world sits along the Atlantic coast of southern Africa, and it looks like it belongs on a different planet. The Namib Desert has existed for somewhere between 55 and 80 million years. Its dunes, particularly around an area called Sossusvlei, are some of the highest in the world, reaching over 300 meters in certain places. And because the iron in the sand has oxidized over millions of years, the dunes are a deep, burnt orange-red color. At the base of some of these dunes is a dry lake bed called Deadvlei. Camel thorn trees grow here, or rather, they used to. They're now dead and black, standing in a white clay pan surrounded by orange dunes, with a bright blue sky above. The trees have been dead for around 900 years. But because the air is so dry, they haven't rotted. They just stand there, perfectly black, against the colors around them. It's one of the most photographed landscapes in Africa, and one of those places where removing any element would make it less interesting, not more. In the South Pacific, surrounded by a turquoise lagoon and a barrier reef, Bora Bora sits as one of the most consistently described, most beautiful islands in the world. The island itself is volcanic. A dramatic basalt peak called Mount Otemanu rises 727 meters in the center of the island, surrounded by jungle. Around the island is a flat, shallow lagoon of water ranging in color from pale blue to deep teal, depending on the depth. Around that is a coral reef that breaks the open ocean's waves and keeps the lagoon calm. The interaction between the colors here is what makes Bora Bora famous. The contrast between the dark green mountain, the white sandy areas of the reef, the brilliant blues of the lagoon, and the deeper blue of the open ocean beyond it is hard to improve on. The water visibility here is exceptional, 30 meters or more in some places. Rays, sharks, and tropical fish are visible from the surface. And because the lagoon is protected and shallow, snorkeling here feels like swimming through an aquarium. The last one is different from everything else on this list because it's not a place. It's something that happens in the sky, and it can be seen from multiple places on Earth. The Northern Lights, or Aurora Borealis, occur when charged particles from the sun enter the Earth's magnetic field and interact with gases in the atmosphere. The result is light, bands and sheets of it in greens, purples, blues, reds, and whites that move and shift and fold across the sky in real time. The best places to see it are areas inside or close to the Arctic Circle, Iceland, northern Norway, northern Canada, Finland, Alaska. The southern lights, or aurora australis, can be seen from parts of Antarctica, southern Chile, and southern New Zealand. What makes the aurora unlike anything else is that it moves. It's not a static image. It fades in, shifts, pulses, and sometimes, on a strong night, it fills the entire sky from horizon to horizon in layers of light that move like something alive. People who have seen a major aurora event often describe it as the single most visually overwhelming thing they've ever seen in nature. There's no photo that does it justice. The dynamic range of the human eye, seeing it live in the dark, is something no camera has fully managed to replicate. It's the one thing on this list where being there in person is categorically different from any recording. 20 places. All of them real. All of them somewhere on the same planet you're sitting on right now. What's wild is that this list barely scratches the surface. There are places in Madagascar, in the Philippine Islands, on the coast of Iceland, inside caves in Mexico, and on the edges of fjords in New Zealand that almost made the cut. The Earth is extraordinarily good at looking impossible, and most of us have only seen a small fraction of what it's actually capable of. Some of these places are being threatened by climate change, over-tourism, or political instability. Some of them require significant effort to reach. But they exist right now in the real world, and that alone is something.